What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and it's another installment of Best Armies in 40K. This time it's for the weekend of January 13th and 14th, 2024. We're just getting back into the swing of things after the off season for the holidays and seeing some absolutely ludicrous results coming out of the 40K metagame right now. Now, unlike previous weeks where we've seen 2 to 3 front runners in our results, usually Chaos Space Marines and Aeldari, this time a new challenger has appeared because Chaos Space Marines and Aeldari both have only a single undefeated result, and we have a new front runner in the meta. So diving into the metagame breakdown, we can see that Necrons have absolutely ransacked the rest of the metagame with 5 undefeated results, taking down not only the massive 8-round Nottingham Super Major, but also the Trident Wargaming Circuit, Mecha Brew Mania, and getting top first and second place at the UTC Circuit Finals with 2 undefeated players at the top of that event. Moving on down the list, we saw a healthy representation of other factions, but almost all of them with only a single undefeated result. Chaos Space Marines took down the Critical Hit Grand Clash. Grey Knights returning for a second week in a row with an undefeated result at Siege of Windsor. I didn't put them in my video last week, and we did talk about Grey Knights going undefeated on my Tuesday live stream show, but I actually messed my notes up. Forgot to put the Grey Knights list in, but the Grey Knights did take down an event last week with an undefeated record, which is very exciting. Genestealer Cults did also go undefeated at an event for 0-1, so 1 draw on their record at the BC League Finals. Orks and Leagues of Votann both sharing glory at New Year's Knockout, both at 5-0, and at the Moonsterland GT, World Eaters and Aeldari both went undefeated. So let's dive into these lists and start by talking about Necrons. And what we're actually going to do is talk about 2 different Necron lists because Necrons are decidedly bifurcated right now between their Hypercrypt Legion and Canoptek Court archetypes. So we'll talk about Canoptek Court first and move our way over to the Nottingham Super Major, the biggest event of the weekend. Now, this event was won by Josh Roberts, who was running Canoptek Court, although I will preface this by saying that this list is likely no longer going to see play because I don't believe that the Nottingham Major used the updated FAQ that was released earlier this week that removed the effect of the detachment's devastating wound stratagem from non-Cryptek and not Canoptek models. I have a whole video talking about that and the implications of that change. I'll put it in the tags here, but this list looks like it is using that interaction quite a bit. That's because the list is running 2 units of 10 Immortals. One of those is being led by an Overlord with the Translocation Shroud. We also have 2 Plasmancers, 1 for each of those units to give them critical hits on 5+. That gives them additional sustained hits with their Tesla carbines that if they then target an enemy that is on an objective, they'll get wound rerolls and can use the stratagem to gain devastating wounds and then reroll to try to get those devastating wounds to do a ton of damage. Illuminor Ceres also buffs the damage output of that unit by giving additional AP and reducing incoming AP. And we also have 3 Technomancers alongside 3 units of Canoptek Wraiths, 2 Doomstalkers to add some big backline guns, as well as a couple utility units in Canoptek Acanthrites and 1 Scarab Swarm. Now moving over to the other archetype of Necrons that we've been seeing play since the release of the Codex, Matt Laura went undefeated 5-0 at the UTC Circuit Finals, and in fact, there were 2 Necron players undefeated at that event with a Hypercrypt Legion, and this is a very similar looking style of list, but plays much differently. Whereas the Canoptek Court is much more reliant on onboard presence and board control, the Hypercrypt Legion is about maneuverability and mobility. This list was running 2 Chronomancers. These characters will allow their attached units to move after firing. Big benefit there is that you can use Hypercrypt Legion to put your units into strategic reserve, bring them out of strategic reserve, fire, and then move, allowing you to take objectives that would normally either be screened out or would not necessarily be in your range to reserve onto. That's a hugely powerful benefit, especially alongside Cosmic Precision, which can allow you to get those units closer than your opponent may be expecting. We then had 2 Catan Shards, 1 of the Nightbringer and 1 of the Void Dragon. These guys are absolutely stellar in a Hypercrypt Legion because it really gets around the fact that Catan Shards traditionally have very poor mobility, alongside Illuminor Ceres, Imhotep the Stormlord, and a Plasmancer with a Risen Tyrant to give his attached unit hit rerolls on the turn that they arrive from reserve. We have 3 units of Immortals, 2 with Gauss Blasters to attach those Chronomancers into, 1 with Tesla Carbines to combo with that Plasmancer, 1 Monolith to make use of the detachment synergies with Monoliths, including being able to give it invulnerable saves and redeploy units out of it reactively, alongside a bunch of utility units, 2 units of 3 Canoptek Scarabs, 1 unit of 5 Deathmarks, and 3 individual Locust Destroyers. With Canoptek Court significantly depowered thanks to the loss of a bunch of damage output with that recent FAQ, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more lists like Matt Laura's list that focus on the extreme maneuverability and the very cheap utility units that Necrons have access to within Hypercrypt Legion. Now, in no particular order, that moves us on to some of the other lists that have gone undefeated. We'll talk about Nicholas Redford's Chaos Space Marines. It's a pretty regular Chaos Space Marine list, although it does focus pretty heavily on utility units, which does give it a little bit of a unique flavor, but mostly is the same kind of Chaos Space Marine fare that we've been seeing for the last couple of weeks. That includes 3 Undivided Chaos Lords, 2 Dark Communes, those leading 2 large Accursed Cultist mobs, alongside 1 unit of Legionaries, 1 unit of Chaos Cultists, 2 Rhinos, the Rhinos embarking 3 units of Chosen to attach onto those Chaos Lords, alongside 2 Forge Fiends, 2 units of Nurglings, 1 unit of Slaaneshi Warp Talons to give them access to advance and charge, and, interestingly, a little bit of spice, a Chaos Predator Destructor. Overall, pretty standard Chaos Space Marine stuff. We've been talking about it forever, so let's move on to a different faction. Grey Knights at the Siege of Windsor went undefeated with Sam Nash piloting the faction to a 5-0 record. Sam was running 2 Brotherhood Librarians, 1 with the Sigil of Exigence to redeploy in response to enemies targeting them, 1 with First to the Fray to allow him to arrive from Deep Strike in your first reinforcement step. Caldor Drago is also in there to allow big charges from a big unit of Paladins, alongside 2 5-man Brotherhood Terminator squads to attach with the Brotherhood Librarians, 1 5-man Strike Squad, 2 5-man Interceptor squads, and 2 5-man Purgation squads, both of those carrying 4 Incinerators. We then also have an Eversor Assassin, which is an inclusion that I really like in Grey Knights. The Calidus Assassin is kind of the easy pick for lone operative characters within Grey Knights, but you don't really need extra uppy-downy effects thanks to the Calidus Assassin's ability to return into reserve and then pop up somewhere on the table. What you do need is ways to project your presence and score your tactical secondaries on the first turn, and the Eversor Assassin allows you to do that with his massive scout movement. He's also cheaper than a Calidus Assassin and occasionally can hit super hard and clear out enemy utility units, which is all things that are super useful for a Grey Knight's army. He's very good at clearing screens, he's good at scoring action secondaries in the middle of the table on turn 1, and is generally just a pretty strong inclusion. Now, the last of the events with a single undefeated player is going to be the BC League Finals. This was won by Alex McDougall, going 4-0-1 with Genestealer Cults. It's nice to see Genestealer Cults back in the running. It's been a long time since they got super duper nerfed way back at the beginning of the edition. They were super strong on release and saw some pretty hefty changes in the last data slate update. We'll see what the next data slate update has in store for them. But for now, Alex was running an Abominant with Inscrutable Cunning to allow his unit to forward deploy, a Nexos, a Primus with Focus of Adoration, alongside 2 unupgraded Primuses and a Reductus Saboteur. We then had 3 units of 10 Acolyte Hybrids rocking Demolition Charges, 3 units of 10 Neophyte Hybrids to act as utility, alongside a big unit of 20 Neophyte Hybrids to be a follow-up Hammer Punch. On top of that, we had 1 big unit of 10 Aberrants to attach alongside that Abominant, 1 single Achilles Ridge Runner to add its Crossfire synergies to the army, alongside 3 Cyclops Demolition Vehicles, these coming out of the Brood Brothers mechanic, allowing Genestealer Cults to bring Imperial Guard in as allies. Those Cyclops Demolition Vehicles, while they aren't necessarily a particularly good unit in and of themselves, they do give you access to a 25-point single entity utility unit that you can use to score secondaries or screen your backline for super duper cheap. And the best part is, for Genestealer Cults, it's not a lone operative character, so it doesn't add additional threat of assassination to your army. This list is actually relatively assassination light, running only 6 characters, but several of those are going to be either very difficult to kill or able to play in the backline and make your army a little bit tougher to score that fixed secondary on. And with that, we'll move on to the New Year's Knockout, which was won by Dan Salmons playing Leagues of Votann. But we also saw some Orks go undefeated as well that we're going to talk about in a moment. moment. First of all, the Leagues of Votann. This list was running an In Here champion alongside 2 Grimnairs, one with a Praising Glare, the other one with Wayfarer's Grace. These guys are largely taken for the fact that they are a huge boat of wounds with a 4+ invulnerable save, making them roughly equivalent in survivability to a Hearthkin Warrior squad. And while they do give up Assassination, you're usually not taking too many characters in a Votann army anyway, so you're not too worried about your opponent taking that against you. And on top of that, the Grimnairs are able to do a little bit of damage and just generally be a more annoying target to kill than the Hearthkin Warriors you would usually be using to fill your Sagitaurs. We then have a Call alongside 1 unit of Hearthkin Warriors that is going to be splitting into 2 to fill 2 of the army's 6 high-las equipped Sagitaurs. 6 of them. That's a lot. On top of the 2 Grimnairs, we also have 2 units of 5 Chthonian Berserks. So those Sagitaurs, 1 of them can be filled with 10 of the Hearthkin Warriors. 2 of them can be filled with the 10 Hearthkin Warriors. 2 of them can be filled with the 2 units of Chthonian Berserks. And 2 of them can be filled with the Grimnairs, allowing them all to start on the table. We then had 2 units of 3 Brokir Thunderkin to add a little bit of shooting firepower, alongside 2 units of In Here Hearthguard, 1 of 10 and 1 of 5. And our utility units were rounded out by 2 units of 3 Hernkin Pioneers. So that moves us on to Joe Guzowski's Orks. Joe is running a little bit of a different variety of Ork build that sees a lot of changes from the normal kind of rote archetype that Orks have been falling into most recently. He was running 2 big mechs in Mega Armor. These guys wildly improve the survivability of their attached Mega Knobs, giving them a 4+ invulnerable save, a once per game D3 heal, and the ability to return a Mega Knob to the unit in each of your command phases. These guys are attached into 2 units of 5 Mega Knobs. We also had Boss Snickrot in a big unit of Commandos, Mozrog Scragbad himself, alongside a War Boss with Super Cyborg up body, and an unupgraded War Boss. Those War Bosses were attached into 2 big units of 10 Knobs, and we also had and to carry them into battle, we had a Truck, a Battle Wagon, and following that up, a Death Dread, which is kind of a cool inclusion, alongside 1 unit of Gretchen and 2 units of 5 Storm Boys to act as utility. Super cool to see the big bricks of Mega Knobs on the table. I don't know if that's necessarily a combination that we've seen too much, but clearly it was working out for Joe because he was able to take this list to a 5-0 record. And last but certainly not least, for this weekend, we saw the Moonsterland GT, which also had 2 undefeated players. The first one being Alexander Tepe, running World Eaters. Alexander was running a relatively standard build of World Eaters, led by Angron, alongside Karn the Betrayer and Lord Invocatus. 1 favored of Khorne, Lord of Juggernaut, and a Master of Executions with the Berserker Glaive. We had 2 units of Khorne Berserkers, 1 of 10 and 1 of 5, following that up with some Jackals to lock in objectives, 1 unit of 3 standard 8-bound, and 2 units of Exalted 8-bound, 1 of 6, and 1 of 3, alongside 2 World Eaters Rhinos to ferry those Khorne Berserkers into battle. Honestly, for an index that doesn't have too many options, World Eaters have kind of been boiled down to lists that look generally like this is kind of the archetype that you're looking for if you're playing them. All of their units hit pretty hard and have a very long threat range, and you're going to be maximizing the number of icons of Khorne, plus rerolls you get from Favorite of Khorne to try to respawn Angron after he yeets into your opponent's army, blows something up, and inevitably gets killed. If he's able to come back to life a couple times, usually that can spell success for the army, which Alexander saw with a 5-0 record. And that moves us on to the, now for the last army of the week. We're actually going to be talking about Aeldari last, rather than their place at first, where we normally had them. Aeldari had 1 single undefeated result this week, also at the Moonsterland GT, where Yannick Rotkin went undefeated with the faction. Yannick was playing a pretty unique flavor of Eldar, and one that we've been seeing a little bit more often more recently, that's not reliant on the big bricks and super powerful artillery that Eldar have been using since the beginning of the edition, instead focusing on aspect warriors and using their efficient infantry to get tons and tons of work done with their Strands of Fate dice. The army included an Avatar of Cain and was led by an Autarch Wayleaper with the Phoenix Gem to allow him to respawn when killed. It also saw a Death Gesture with Fate's Messenger to allow him to do damage with his Sustain 3 or Devastating Wound gun by flipping his attack dice into 6s. We also saw a Farseer and a Spirit Seer. The Spirit Seer actually attaching onto a single Wraith Lord today, which is kind of a cool combo that we don't normally see with that guy. We had 10 Guardian Defenders, 2 units of 5 Dire Avengers, alongside 2 units of 5 Fire Dragons. Those are going to be jumping into 2 Wave Serpents, alongside 1 unit of 5 Striking Scorpions to act as infiltrators, 2 units of 3 Wind Riders, alongside 2 Warwalkers, those 2 Wave Serpents I mentioned earlier, and the Wraith Lord equipped with Flamers and Bright Lances. Very different style of list than we've been seeing from Eldar recently. It's cool to see the faction be able to pivot fluidly from the archetypes that have been kind of baked in since the beginning of the edition. If we see some nerfs to the super busted units in the Eldar faction, things like Night Spinners and Wraithguard, unless some really core mechanical changes get implemented in the upcoming data slate, because they have such a deep roster of units that they can draw on if their super powerful bricks do get nerfed. Lists like these are a lot more interesting, a lot more technical, and I would say probably harder to play than the standard Eldar fare, and I would like to see them. And I think it would be cool to see Eldar move in that direction, rather than just being a faction of huge battleship units like Knights, Avatars, and Wraithguard bricks. And with that, those are all the best armies in Warhammer 40k for this week. Let me know down in the comment section which one is your favorite, and whether or not you were surprised by the absolute predominance of Necrons this week. Sounds like Canoptek Court maybe really did need a little bit of a nerf, although I think a large part of it is that players haven't really figured out how to play against Necrons. I do think some of the data sheets in the Codex are probably a little bit too pushed. I'm looking at Catan shards right now, and we did see some of those get play in the Hypercrypt Legion lists. That went undefeated, but I wasn't really prepared for the number of wins that Necrons would get. It would be interesting to see if they continue to do so without any changes to Canoptek Court, but obviously at this point we'll never know. And with that, thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Big thanks to everybody who helps me keep the lights on over here by supporting the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, by joining the YouTube membership down below, or by subscribing to me on Twitch. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.